Welcome to the Help and Hope podcast, produced by MARKINC Ministries. I know that you have experienced throughout your lifetime issues with friendship, whether it's the 5-year-old on the playground who gets left out of the game, or the 30-year-old who sees her friend group pictures on social media and knows that she was left out, or the woman who is going through the hardest time of her life alone because friendships have broken down and she's just lonely and she has nobody else. I think that all of us know what this is like. And I know that the women in the podcast today know what it's like. Between the three of us, we've had our share of fantastic friendships and broken friendships. And so I'm Sharon Betters, and Heidi Nyquist is my co-host, and we are so eager to jump into a conversation with Kristen Strong about friendships. Kristen is the wife of an Air Force veteran. So, that means she's military. That means she has been seeing lots of places and lots of change in her life. She's the mother of 3 children, which probably means that she's navigating friendships with her children, teaching them about friendship. And she is very passionate about writing about relationships and friendships on her blog, but also in multiple books about relationships. And today we're going to touch a little bit on her books, but a lot on friendships. Her most recent book is Praying Through Loneliness, which is a great devotional I want to recommend. And her newest book is Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. So you know that Kristen also has a great sense of humor. So let's jump into our conversation about friendship. And Kristen, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Sharon. Thank you so much for opening up your virtual home here to me.
Welcome.
Kristen, you are a prolific writer. What makes you talk so much and write so much about friendship in your books and blogs?
Well, I would say because I realized I didn't know really how to do friendship, and there was a steep learning curve. And I think, I think we see pictures on social media of all these friends hanging out, and we just think, oh, it's just so easy to make friends for a lot of folks, and maybe there's something wrong with us. And I think that's just a big lie. I think it's really hard for all of us to make friends. It's a learned art and it's a learned skill. And I grew up on O'Neill Lane. So happy St. Patrick's Day. My last name was O'Neill. but everybody's last name on O'Neill Lane was O'Neill. So I grew up in a deep well of family and familiarity. Even when I went to college in Arroway, a lot of my family and friends went there too. But I fell in love with a fella there. We decided to get married, and he was commissioning. He had been on the enlisted side of the fence, but he was commissioning onto the officer side upon graduation. So there started this life where I really realized, I don't think I've ever had to make friends before. They were just kind of always there. And I mean, it's not 100% true. I had to, I made friends at college and whatnot here and there, but it just, a lot of the foundation was set up for me to be able to do that easily. And when he whisked me from Oklahoma, where I grew up, to Ohio, which felt like the moon, because it, even though it's not as that's dramatic, but in my 21-year-old mind, it felt real different. And it wasn't that I didn't just know everybody as I didn't know anybody. And so I had to learn how to make friends. And I had a lot of missteps with that. I kind of learned I had a needy side to my personality. I was never really the mean girl. That's not to say I never did a mean thing as a friend, or as, somebody not being a good friend, but I was not that classic mean girl. But I was the needy girl, 6 ways from Sunday. And, that's still acting out of insecurities and not really fun for the person on the other end. So I would say that's why I became so fascinated with it, is just because I felt like I had so much to learn from it, and saw that really, I think as time marched on, it seemed to me that more and more folks were struggling with.
You bring up something that I hadn't really thought about, but you said that you discovered that you were on the needy girl side of things. And I'm wondering how friendship when we struggle with friendship, how does that help show us things about ourselves that maybe we need to
Yeah.
address
Yeah.
in ourselves?
Well, I think it can show you the expectations you have. And I remember, I just used to feel like, well, so when my husband and I married, I actually transferred colleges as a senior,
Mm,
which, may not have been the best idea, but it was okay. It was good for me because, it was the right thing to do to stay with my new husband.
Mhm.
But, I just expected everybody at my new college to know I was the new girl and to do the work to invest in reaching out to me. And of course they didn't, because that's really not how it works in a lot of way, in a lot of circumstances. And so, yeah, I just had to learn to be the one to go first a lot of the time and to put in more work than maybe I felt like I was receiving in return, at least at the beginning.
Hmm.
do you think that was the time of your life where that really started to manifest this desire to investigate, research, whatever word you want to use for about friendships at that year in college, or was it
Yes.
before that? You think it was
No,
that?
I think it was right then and there because that was the first time I didn't know, like I really had to build friendships from the ground up. I
Hmm.
did not have relationships to fall back on or a huge network of family to fall back on. I didn't have anybody there, and my husband traveled all the time, and so it was often just me. And so yeah, like it was very much a stark realization, like, oh, these people are not just going to apparate on my front porch like out of Harry Potter or something, like you're
Right.
going to have um to put the work in. And then but then when you do that, you get some rejection. Not everybody is meant to be your friend. So it was also a learning curve for me to push through that rejection and still try again. So I would say yes, you're exactly right, Heidi. It was right at that time. Yeah.
Mm. Hmm.
Well,
And
Kristen,
how long after that did you
mm,
start to really write about it?
mm,
I didn't really start writing about it until um probably 12 years later.
Mm,
It wasn't until my husband deployed, and I had these little ones that I
mm,
was in charge of. I have twin sons,
mm,
who are not little anymore. They're 25, and then a daughter
mm,
who's 21.
mm,
But it was just like I think once I got high school, college, young, married with little babies and whatnot,
mhm,
I just kind of put writing on a shelf and didn't really
mhm,
do much with it. But when he deployed, I brought it back out, and it just felt like a friend and a way for me to
mm,
process things. And the very first
mhm,
article I wrote was for the Mops magazine, and it was on friendship. So, and that was 2008, I think. So, I
mm.
guess 13 years after that point in
wow.
time, 12 or 13. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Heidi has twins too.
I do.
Oh,
Boy girl
I'm,
twins. They're my babies, but they're 21. So I have five
ah,
children.
oh, wonderful. I love that. I always feel
Yeah.
kinship with mothers of multiples.
Yes. Yes. It was, and if they had been my first, they might have been my last.
Well, you had it harder. When they are your first, you don't know differently.
That's
So
right. That's
so
right.
my daughter seemed like a piece of cake because I'm like, well,
I'm
she's just
sure.
one.
Yes,
So
I am
so
sure.
you had it much harder than I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Kristen, you've touched on a couple of areas that I really would love for us to dig into a little bit. One is you were in college
Yeah.
when you first realized, whoa, this is what I've had all my life was a gift.
Yeah.
I did not know that this is what real life was like, that I'm going to have to work at this. So think about that college girl.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm thinking about some college girls who, and they've lived through the pandemic, which has
Yeah.
made it even more difficult for them with relationships. It sounds like you came to a point, you were very intentional. Somehow at that age, you recognize, well, I guess it's going to be up to me. So,
Yeah.
what would be some of the practical things that you would say to that that a young woman, whether she's in college or she's out of college now, and that's also another weird age where you're kind of in if you're not getting married, you're kind of in a limbo as far as relationships goes, because you're moving on into a career, your friends are moving on maybe somewhere else. What kind of counsel would you give to that young person who is saying, I am so lonely, but I don't know what to do about it, and I feel
Right.
rejected. I feel
Right.
isolated and rejected, even though I look fine. What
Right.
can I do to change this?
Well, I would say, as a precursor to that, just in the interest of full disclosure,
Mm,
I did not handle it well at the beginning. Like, I did
mhm,
not just show up and was like, "Oh well, I guess I just got to put myself out there more." I I was mad about it. I was frustrated. And I would dip my toe in with folks and then kind of
mm,
perceive their rejection and then yank it back out. And I think I played the victim somewhat too. I was like, well, the winters are long here, nobody's outside, so it's kind of hard to make
mm,
friends. Or people, when you transfer schools as a senior, people
mhm,
have their people, they got a lot of friends, they're not necessarily looking for a new one. So I'm not going to find friends there, or there must be something wrong with me. I had an accent thick as molasses, I sounded like Blake Shelton. And I was at this private liberal arts school where I had folk, like I had a acquaintance friend that was a fellow music major with me. She grew up in Connecticut. Her neighbor was David Letterman. so my neighbors were my family, and then a lot of Holstein dairy cows. So like I did have the odds set up against me where it was really hard.
mm,
Um, but there came a point where it was like, yeah, okay, Kristen, you're not putting in any effort and expecting everybody else to do everything. That
mm,
is not how it's going to work. You're going to have to put in effort too. And so what I did was February of that year. So, a little over halfway through the school year, I was in a quintet, um,
mm,
and I invited the other four members to my house for like just I don't remember. It was a Friday night, I believe. I had them out, maybe Saturday, and I just had treats and like I made punch, like we were in the church basement or something.
mm,
Um, I my mama's old punch recipe, and so and they all said yes, and they came. And
mm,
and it was the neatest thing because listen, I haven't talked to them in decades. That it wasn't like we really bonded long term, but we got to talk to each other outside the school setting, and it
mm,
really helped me see what I could do to encourage friendship, even if the friendship with these particular four people didn't go beyond that year of college.
yeah,
So I would say, yeah, to the college girl who's lonely. In fact, my daughter, who's a junior in college right now, we talked about this, and she advised, like, you get out of your dorm room.
mm,
If you want to just hole up in your dorm room, you probably are going to feel lonely. So
mhm,
join a club, find an event. I would say find a church that has a young college group there that you can go to, as well. But yeah, find an organization, get out, even in the lunch hall. If you see somebody sitting by themselves,
mm,
introduce yourselves and sit down. So it's awkward, it can be anyway, but that, as Holly Girth says, awkward is the price of admission for connection. And so you
mm,
have to push through the awkward to
Mhm.
get out of the dorm room, to go into some sort of place and introduce yourself to some folks.
And I think that that goes for every stage of life.
mm,
Yes,
You know,
yes,
you can be walking into a church that you are very familiar with and still be unsure of where you belong, where your
absolutely.
people are.
Yeah.
Any kind of, you can go to a book club with people that you've been involved with for years and still be unsure where you fit in that circle. And so I think that a lot I was interested when you were talking about being intentional. If we go to the flip side of that and we talk about boundaries when it comes to friendship,
mm,
Yeah.
we have to be intentional and also have boundaries.
Yes.
you know
Yes.
And then
Yes.
and then when you play that rejection in, I grew up in the church and had 14 bridesmaids. So that should
Oh,
tell you.
And they were all your best friends and your
They were
aunts.
all my best friends.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, I'm in my 50s now, and they are not my circle.
right.
They are not the people that are my circle, and I'm not their people anymore, in
Right.
almost every case. And which is kind of shocking,
Mm.
So I'm when I read your book, Praying Through Loneliness, I resonated with several of the stories because of how much how similar that is when it comes to women in any generation,
Right. Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Yeah. And just to tag on to what I was saying, yeah. So getting out helps you make friends, but also, like I did, inviting folks into your home,
Right,
even just to watch a movie and have popcorn together, that
right,
for a
right.
young for the younger college gals, that's a great way to connect as well. But no, I 100% am with you there. And with Praying Through Loneliness, and let me just mention, so I compiled that book. I didn't write the entire thing. I wrote parts of it, but I did some editing and compiled it. But I think kind of where we get tripped up then, when we're a member of the book club and we're still feel like, well, we go and we're a member, but we don't really feel like a member as much as we could. I think what's missing then is the vulnerability component. Drew Hunter wrote this fantastic book called Made for Friendship. And he talks in there about how what we really need are submarine friends, just a few that we go deep with, and what we treat friendship like a cruise ship, where we just know a little bit about a lot of people. So I love that though, because really you're gonna the amount of connectedness you feel to folks is going to be proportional to how deep you feel like you can go with them. I have a real good friend here, May, and she, if I had killed somebody, she'd know where the body was buried. She just knows everything. I have not killed anybody, but she just knows everything. And then I have another circle of friends who know a lot. And then to be honest, I have some journals that are just like me talking to God. That is really unfiltered. In fact, my friend May, if I should expire, she knows where they are so she can burn them. So
that's what my 21-year-old daughter asked me. She said, if something happens to you, do you want me to read them or burn them? And I said, I never considered that you wouldn't read them.
You know what? Mine are in cursive, and that's now a font that kids can't read. So it doesn't read it.
She said that to me too. She said, well, if you want us to read them, can you start printing, please? And I was like, no.
No, I'm not printing. That takes twice as long. No.
That's right.
It's so funny because Nathan, your 21-year-old twin, he told me, he said, Grammy, you don't need to worry because I can't read cursive. So I'm not going to be reading your journals.
Yes, I know it.
I was shocked. I was in shock. I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I should start printing. I don't know.
I know. I probably should. I don't know that anybody could probably read mine but me. I feel like mine, it's like a doctor, fast and swirly, but
yeah.
But anyway, so I just love that idea that, and not that every group is supposed to be submarine deep. I'm not going to be as deep with a book club as I might with a one-on-one with my good friend, but there's varying levels. And so if you're not feeling satisfied in any sort of group or with any one person, that might be something to consider.
It's interesting you said that, because I just finished a book of another author that we're interviewing later this month. And he talks specifically about how he had different levels of friendship for different things that not just he needed, but they needed. And there was, I could talk to this one person about this one thing deeply because they understood it deeply. But if I tried to talk to this friend over here about that same topic, forget it. They look at me like I had 8 heads. And that was kind of a concept that, and now you're confirming it. You're saying the same thing, which is interesting. Yeah, which is interesting to me because I think a lot of times we think we have to be the same with everybody. Everybody should get all of us, or we won't. We start fearing rejection. We won't get it back. And we start being afraid. So, I'll give it all to you. But that's where those boundaries become so important, and knowing where the submarine friends are,
Right,
and
right,
why they're so important in
right.
our lives and so critical. I love that.
Agreed.
Another thing that you mentioned that, excuse me, I think the expectations of friendship is really important. And obviously, this comes with age and wisdom and life and all of that. But one thing that I think is surprising to many of us is that this could be our friend group when we're in our 20s. And they're like, that we have that core of really terrific friends. But then as we go into our 30s, or maybe it happens from college, we go into, because you were talking about your music friends. They're not your best friends now, but so seasons of life, friendships can change, relationships can change. And I think when we understand that, we can protect ourselves from unnecessary hurt. When a friend goes in, they're going in a different direction than we are going. And it's almost impossible to keep that same kind of relationship up. But we feel hurt often by it
Yeah,
because why aren't they our friends anymore? All of a
right.
sudden we might think about it. So I think that's another big takeaway too, is seasons of life. Friendships are for a time
Yeah,
often. I can think back over my history of the different churches that we've been in, and there was a core. They were my friends then. They were deep friends. And if I saw them today, I'd pick up right where I left off. But I haven't talked to them in 20 years.
sure.
That thing,
hmm
kind of
Yes,
thing. And it wasn't personal. There was nothing personal about it. It was
right.
just a season of life. They were there for that time, for such a time as this. So, but I think it's, there's a grieving process that sometimes we go through when those kinds of things happen.
I
So,
agree. And there is that quote, and I don't remember who said it, but it's, friendships are for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. And
mm,
not everyone is meant to be friends forever. And I know when that's real hard, though, is when you see yourself as somebody's pretty good friend, and then it
mm,
becomes apparent they see you just as like more of an acquaintance or something,
yeah.
um my friend May calls it like active friendships and passive friendships. You think that
Mm,
one is an active friendship and you're going to be texting and getting together, and they see you as more of a passive friend. And
mm,
I try to remember during those times, because that has certainly happened to me, where I'm like, oh, I thought we were this one friend and I guess we're
mm,
not. And my friend Selena Duffy has said a while back that, rejection is God's protection against what's not in our best interest. And that's
mm,
what I try to remember there. Even though it's hard and I don't want it to be that way, that
mm,
maybe something would have come to light, that it would have not been, something would have
mm,
surfaced where that friendship just wouldn't have, would have brought harm to me that I didn't
mm,
know way back there, but God did. And so he provided a way for us to go our separate ways. And I know
mm,
it's hard when that happens, but it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. It just means God wants us to turn our direction elsewhere. And, we have the freedom to do that and to bring ourselves to folks who will appreciate us and all that we do bring to a friendship.
mm. And another pathway could be that the Lord wants you to put that time into another friend, into
Yes,
someone else who really needs you to be there in their lives that you wouldn't even be seeking if you still had that same connection with that previous
exactly.
friend.
And
So,
in my life before, it's even been that the Lord was like, listen, Kristen, I want to deal with some things with you. And so I'm removing some distractions. Like, we're going to
mm,
winnow this away so that I can have your attention. And I think
mm,
sometimes that's the key too. Now, we're not going to be that way forever. If Jesus walked the planet with friends, it's a good idea for us to as well. God wants us to as well. But for a
mhm,
season, that might happen. Yeah.
mm.
How do you feel that the social media world has changed friendships?
Mm,
Or do
mm.
you feel that social media has changed friendships?
I do. I do. I don't think it should get all the blame for why it's harder today to
Mm,
make friends than it ever has been, but it does get some of the blame. I
Yeah.
think it's just easy. Like I talked about how making friends is awkward. Social media kind of lets us circumvent the awkward a little bit. If you're just communicating digitally, you get to not
Mhm.
bring your whole vulnerable self as much to the table. But also, I think social media can be just like an endless supply of breadcrumbs,
mm,
of communication with folks. And really, what we need is like the meal that is in person communication.
mm,
But social media just kind of tricks us that it's feeding us when it's really just, we're just dining on breadcrumbs all day long. So it's not as nearly as satisfying, as it could be person to person. And not
mm.
that, like, I have a lot of friendships that started on social media, and that's there is nothing wrong with social media
Right.
friendships, but
Right.
ideally some of those jump off the screen and you can, connect in real life as well.
Well, in the younger generations, that's all they do. That's,
Yeah.
I ask my kids all the time, aren't you going to go out and do something with your friends? Oh, I am. I am talking to my
Mm.
friends, but you're in your room.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're online and we're doing this and and then there's the weaponization of
Mm,
Facebook and oh,
mm,
she unfollowed me, he blocked me, those the things that make it easy for us to hurt each other for no
Mm.
reason,
Yeah.
and feel jealous of other people because their lives seem so perfect. Well, maybe I don't fit in that role, or like we said in the very beginning, I saw all my friends out and I wasn't invited, type thing. So
Right.
I think that I feel like we run into that a lot with even my generation,
mm,
especially my
Oh.
generation. I can't believe so and so blocked me, or so and so, and why did
mm,
she unfriend me? I didn't even talk to her. Why did she unfriend me? And I just think that those are the things that make us retreat.
mm,
It
Absolutely.
made it so that the world of the pandemic, where we were all had to huddle into our houses, it was a little safer then,
mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
than putting myself out there. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that that's very true. I do find it interesting though, because I've heard and read an article and then heard a couple of things about how Gen Z though, like a lot of them want a dumb phone. They don't want a smartphone now
mm,
yeah,
because they're kind of tired of that rat race of
yes,
sorts that
yes,
being on social media is.
yes,
Um, Now, yeah, have my kids have never been huge social media person. They're all on it, but they have not gone the dumb phone route yet either.
mm,
yeah,
And they're
yeah,
Gen Z. So I don't know, kind of what those trends will look like in another 5-10 years.
yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I've seen people, from that age and myself. Yeah. When I notice, which I know it's such a bad idea to check, but
It's
yet
such
I
a
have
bad idea, yet we all
such
do
a bad
it.
idea. I know, like, just don't do it and save yourself the headache. But I will every once in a while, and I know a couple of times it's been like, oh, but I really like you.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but
Now
I
what
think
did I
it's
do?
yes. And I think it's just kind of what we were talking about when, you're fine. It's sort of like being placed in a different kind of friendship with somebody. You thought you were one way, turns out it's another one. And another thing Drew Hunter talks about is friendship lanes. And,
Yes.
you think you're in this lane with this friend, but nope.
mm,
He's put you in this other lane. And if you keep like trying to grab his steering wheel and bring him over, he's just going to look for the exit. And so
mm,
I just
mm,
think digitally, in person, we've just got to have open hands and
Mhm.
think that if this person is not in my life, maybe it's just about her bandwidth. Like she can only follow and keep up with so many people,
mm,
and she's got important things going on, and I fall outside that bandwidth, because the reality is people fall outside my bandwidth too.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's not necessarily personal. It's just reality that we all deal with. And I think we have to tell our pride to sit down, like, you're
Mhm.
going to be fine. if
Mhm.
if so
Mhm.
and so isn't your
mm,
online friend or in-person friend. But
Yeah.
listen, I say that, and that is all very true what I just said, but it
mm,
is hard in the moment, and I think it's
Yeah.
okay to be a little sad about it,
Yeah.
for a little while.
Well, thinking of, in your putting you in your lane and putting people in their lanes and that sort of thing. And I love that picture.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great picture.
Mm-hmm.
But what about when it's an in-person friend and you love that friend and you've had a great friendship and you've done life together, maybe for years, and then that friend doesn't want to be your friend anymore? Um, have you ever had that happen? And what if you find out or you realize that she doesn't want to be your friend anymore because she's holding you responsible for things that you really didn't do?
Mm,
You had
Right.
nothing to do with it,
mm,
but there doesn't seem to be an opportunity to be able to fix it. And
Right.
how do you navigate that kind of a minefield?
Mm. I have had that happen before. Not necessarily, well, not for a reason that I became aware of, that like what you're talking about.
Mhm,
Maybe that has happened and they just didn't, I didn't put
mhm,
that two and two together. But I have had friendships where, like, I can think of one especially, a couple of more in varying degrees, but one especially, like, we were like doing stuff all the time. And then, like a light switch, she dropped me.
mhm,
mm.
And I am finding out that is happening a lot.
Yes.
Like, and
mhm,
I don't know if it's because, I don't know if we're like it's the grass is always greener. We're finding somebody we think's a better friend, and so we're dropping the old one. Or I know, is it, who is the Pope right now? Is it Saint Francis? Saint, not Saint Francis, Saint. I cannot remember. I'm sorry. I'm not Catholic, but I cannot remember. He had a good quote though of like, we're in a throwaway culture. And
Mm,
so like somebody is making a garden variety mistake. And so we're just dumping
mhm,
them, and sacrificing the relationship, friendships, as well as other relationships. Um, so what I have seen over and over again when this happens, it is not about you. It is about
mhm,
that person. It is
mhm,
something they are going through. Uh, Sometimes, I mean, listen, well, it could be for any number of reasons, but the bottom line is it's not about you. It's not about what you did or what you think you did or were perceived to have done. It is
mhm,
about something that is in them and around them, going on with them. And
mhm,
I think just being able to hold on to that and realize that, painful though it may be, this is still, not, um, just in this season anyway, this person is not God's best for you. And
yeah,
so it's ending. But boy, it is hard because listen, I have cried buckets over that
mm,
friendship that happened that way.
yeah, yeah,
And it's like, I mean, it'll send you to therapy. That those
mm.
things are really
yeah,
Mhm.
difficult. So
Yeah.
I definitely don't make light of it, but that's just been kind of what has helped me the most, is realizing pretty much unanimously, it is not about you. And just pivoting from that, toxic thoughts of what did I do wrong, or what did I not do that I should have done, or what should I have done that I didn't do. Pivot from that to, God's truth about you and who
mhm,
He says you are, beloved, chosen, wanted, and to just try to fill that hole as you're healing.
yeah. I remember. I mean, as clear as I remember where I was. I remember picking up the phone back then. We didn't have smartphones or dumb phones or anything, just phones on
Right.
the wall. But calling she's an older woman in my life. I mean, I could cry about it right now. And the friendship was over, and I knew it. And
Ugh.
I didn't know why. I had no idea what I had done. And I'm going to do the right thing biblically. I'm going to call her and I'm going to ask her, help
Right.
me understand. If I've done something wrong, I'll fix it. I'll say I'm sorry, whatever you need. No, everything's fine. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's changed. Everything had changed. And
Ugh.
so I was in my 20s, my early 20s, and I just and she had acted like a mother to me. We were a
Oh.
young pastor's wife and all of that. I know I found out later what had happened. It had nothing to do with me, but I was part of the package deal, so I
Oh.
was rejected. But
Collateral damage.
collateral
Yeah.
damage, but I remember that feeling of I somehow I knew, Lord, I know this isn't about me. There's nothing I can do. I just have to depend on you to fill this
Right.
void in my heart right now,
Right.
because I did the right thing. I felt like I did the right thing spiritually. I'm not taking this any further. There
Right.
was just an ice there that I knew I was not going to get through. So,
Right.
and you've talked about the Lord, that you have to go with open hands. You have to, I think you grieve. We're not saying, just like you said, you've cried buckets over your
Right.
friendship
Right.
breakup, but you think about the people who would say, I've done all the things that Kristen said to do. I've tried, and people are nice, but I still can't seem to break through.
Mm,
Um, now what? Because we know biblically, God keeps many of his promises through relationships, through community, and
right.
he's made us to need one another. Because there are many gifts there. So, how do you cope with that? You've kind of alluded to it earlier in our conversation, but you're in that season where you are lonely. You're so lonely, and you could be surrounded by people, but you don't have that go-to person
Mm,
anymore.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that?
Yeah, being lonely in a crowd, that's definitely a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
as well. I think first of all, you just commit to, you don't give up. I think it's so easy when we've been burned a few times to give up or just say, women are not worth the work.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I
Yeah.
certainly get that kind of thinking. I've given into that myself. I'm like, gosh, what? I'll just, I got my husband. It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my husband needs me to have some other friends too. So, but
Yep.
otherwise I will give all the words to him, and it's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of words. But but I tell you, what I honestly believe is kind of this idea of showing up, opening up, praying up,
Mm-hmm.
showing up where women are. Right? You can't really meet new people unless you're out and about there with new people. Now,
Mm-hmm.
having said that, I always think too that the burden is also on those who have been in their places for a long time. No, we should never have this idea like, I got my friends, I'm done, check, goodbye. You never
Mm-hmm.
know when the Lord wants to do a new thing. So I would say to those like me who have now I've lived in Colorado Springs now. This summer, it'll be 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not the new girl anymore. And so it is beholden upon me to keep my eyes open for, a new friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, we don't have time to be good friends with everybody we meet, but we have time for the folks that the Lord puts in our lives and wills for us to have
Mm-hmm.
a friendship with. So keeping our hearts open to that and not thinking, oh, I'm done. But for the one who is lonely, and also again, to preach to those who are like me. I had a good friend of mine. We were stationed together 20 years ago. She's in Colorado Springs now, so we
Mm-hmm.
reconnected, which has been fun. But she was telling me how she asked three separate people for a coffee date when she first got here,
Mm-hmm.
and they all said no.
Mm.
And
Wow.
I'm I'm like, and they were all established people. And so,
Oh.
listen, I get, perhaps it's a bad season, who knows what's going on with home life. And it really
Mm-hmm.
may have been like the thought of one more thing was going to send them over the edge. I get that. But you can schedule it 3 months from now also. So I just, that is hard when you are the person putting yourself out there over and over again. To be shot down like that is
Mm-hmm.
really difficult. So, again, encouraging those like me to be open to those, even if you can't make it work for 6 months from now. You put it on
Mm-hmm.
the calendar and you can still, you can get her done then when you can get her done. But for the girl who's on the flip side of that, showing up where women are and just making introductions, and then opening up your home like I talked about. I think that's the quickest way to
Mm-hmm.
form a friendship, because there's just something about opening up your home that's like opening up your heart too,
Mm-hmm.
and you can just have better conversations that way.
It's a
And
lost art.
It is a lost art. And you can
Mm-hmm.
make it easy. Just buy a Papa Murphy's pizza and
Mm-hmm.
a bag of salad and do that. Like, people don't care if they aren't cooking, they do not care.
Right.
Paper plates. I've served many a company on paper plates with paper napkins. People do not care. They aren't coming to see your house that looks like a museum. Nobody
Right.
relaxes in a museum anyway. So just
Right.
be you. So I think that is an excellent way to do it. Or meet up at a restaurant if you don't want to mess with your house. Say, what are y'all doing, Sunday night or Friday night or whenever? Can we meet up at, at a mutually agreed upon place? That's a great idea too. And then to pray up, again, because God wants each one of us to have our friends. We are not the exception to that. God speaks to us through our friends. We need God, like you said, Sharon, fulfills his promises a lot of times through community. We need our friends that we can be real with and be comfortable being real with. So pray for the Lord as you work to show up at places and open up your home, that the Lord brings you the right person to extend that invite to, and to move your heart to be interested in her as he moves her heart to be interested in you.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that there was a time where a friend seemed to be removed from your life, and you realized the Lord was saying, "This is our time
Mm,
between you and me." And so, if that person that we're talking to right now, young woman, older woman, you're desperately lonely, and you've done everything that Kristen has said to do. So, Kristen, during that season where you're just waiting, what what can you do in your own heart and in yourself to make that a learning time and a growing deeper in your relationship to the Lord?
yeah. Well, I did I'm a big journaler, which is probably not a surprise since I'm a writer.
Mm,
I journal out like I don't know, and I can't remember, but Ann Voskamp has really great quotes about journaling, but
mm,
just getting it from the inside to the outside, there's
mm,
something like I stand up and feel 10 pounds lighter after
mm,
I have a good, and all I do is it's just like prayer. It's like, dear Father in heaven. And then I go with all the things. So I thought that was something I did during that time to just kind of sit. And then also, I don't know, it just sets myself up to hear from him better. And I kind of write that down as well. And of course, then you can go back and look at it. And when I forget what he's told me before, which of
mm,
course happens, and so it's good to
mm,
go back and read that as well. So I did that then. And also I would, I remember making a lot of soup during that time. Soup for my family, soup for others. It felt like just getting my hands busy
mm,
and doing something to serve others was a great way to just walk through that. If I was struggling, I know this is, I think the quote, it's by Ann Voskamp, but it's something along the lines of, when we're struggling to feel joyful ourselves in something, to be the way somebody else receives joy is really powerful. And
Mm-hmm.
yes.
so yeah, so I love, so I thought that is just a good way to be. So because I can be prone to sitting and sulking and kind of getting just all up in my head about it. And not that there's not room to do a little bit of lamenting the
Mm,
situation, that is not a problem at all, but I can just carry that too far. So keeping my hands
mm.
busy, writing, serving, I think that helps me during that time.
Can you give us a precursor to your next book? Can you tell
Oh,
us,
sure.
give us a
Well,
sneak peek?
yes.
Mhm.
Well, I've talked a little bit about some things that are in the book,
I
actually.
figured.
So, so yeah. So, Desperate Woman Seeks Friends, and the subtitle is Real Talk About Connection, Rejection, and Trying Again for the Friendships You Need.
Mm,
And
Mm,
so that title comes from, though, when we were stationed in Ohio the second time. So by the second time, I had two 5-year olds, brand new 5-year olds, and a 1-year old,
mm,
and I could not make friends to save my life.
mm,
We had just moved from an on-base community where it was real easy. It was real easy to make friends on base because everybody is, sort of like, we skip over the small talk because we know
mhm,
we have limited time. But I moved to this neighborhood where it was like everybody had their people and they were not interested in new people.
Mm.
And so I told my husband one night, and of course, my 5-year-olds were they were in preschool at that time. They weren't quite in kindergarten, but we still had poster board. And I said, and this was 2004, so before
Mm.
social media. I said, or 2005, I said, I am going to make a sign. And we had a corner lot. Our house was on a corner lot. I'm going to make a sign that says "Desperate Woman Seeks Friends." I'm just going to stand in my yard and see if anybody, because nothing else is working. I've
Oh.
showed up, I've
Mm.
prayed, for a year and it's not happening. I've
Mm.
invited people over, and yeah, it might lead to a second get together, but it just would fizzle out. So I'm just going to do that and see how I do. And my husband was like, "Are you really going to do that?" but anyway, I ended up not doing it, but I was so close, like this close to doing it. But shortly after that, I did meet my friend Sherry because we kept going to the park at the same time with our young kids. And so we struck up a conversation, and we're still friends today, even though we haven't lived in the same area
Mm.
since 2010, or 2007. So
Mm.
I think there was something to just giving God my desperation. And that's how I felt. I was desperate. It can be
Mhm.
sort of, I think in some Christian circles, you don't want to admit to being like as desperate as you feel, but I was desperate. I was so lonely. My husband was
Mm.
so busy with his job, and I had these little people, and I just wanted to talk to grown-ups. And
Mm.
so that's, I would say, that kind of lays the foundation for the book. And it's a lot of my stories of getting it wrong, but then
Mm.
learning how to do better until, I mean, because I do have a great friend group today, but I sure haven't always. And so just
Mm.
kind of what I've learned along the way there.
I'm so excited to read your book.
Me
Oh,
too.
thank you.
I mean, the title is fantastic.
Thank
It
you.
says exactly what it's about. So no surprise there, but you are, don't be surprised if we invite you to come back,
Oh,
because
Yeah.
I
I'd
feel
love
like
to.
we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here. There's just
Yeah.
so much to talk about here. So as we wrap up, would you, put go back to that time in your life where you were, and you've shared a lot of the personal things, the practical things to do, but just take a minute to talk to that young woman that you were back in 2004. What comfort, encouragement can you give her?
Hmm. I'd tell her that listen, she is not lonely by her lonesome. The Lord
Mm.
sees her in her loneliness. The Lord understands where she's been. She understands how he understands how she's been hurt, rejected. Jesus faced rejection. I mean, he had, look what Judas did to him, and Judas
Mm.
saw him and walked with him and did life with him, and he went down in infamy for
Mm.
being a bad friend. So Jesus understands where you are going through, and he is your friend that will never fail you. All earthly friends, we are going to fail at some point. My
Mm.
friends, as much as I love them, and they really are excellent friends. I think I'm a good friend, but I'm not a perfect friend. We're
Mm.
not going to, we're all human, and we're going to maybe forget a birthday or say
Mhm.
we're going to do something and forget and don't do that, but Jesus is the only friend you can have that will never, ever fail you. And he understands where you've been. There's not a season you've gone through where he does
Mm.
not identify with you in your sorrow, your hardship when it comes to friending and trying to befriend and be
Mm.
friends with other women. So
Mm.
hold on to that and know that he will get you to where you want to be. It just may not be on your timeline. You just have to keep participating in the process, though.
Mm. Participating in the process. It is a process.
Yeah.
Kristen, where can people find you, connect
You can
with
find
you?
me at kristenstrong.com, and it's Kristen, strong.com. And then on Instagram is the platform I'm on pretty regularly. And again, it's just my name, at Kristen Strong.
Okay.
And you can find out info from the books. You can get the books anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your favorite bookshop. But there's also, you can read more about them at kristenstrong.com too.
Yeah. And we'll have lots of show notes with all of that information, how you can get in touch with Kristen in case you're driving and you can't write it down right now.
Yes.
Some information about her books and her blog. And just, I hope that you'll visit the website where you're going to find more stories like Kristen's More Help and Hope podcast, offering the hope of Jesus, the light of Jesus. And you can do that at helpandhopenow.org. That's helpandhopenow.org. I'm Sharon Betters, and my co-host Heidi Niequist. We have been having this fun, delightful, and very caring conversation with Kristen Strong, author, blogger, mother, friend. Make sure that you check out her website, kristenstrong.com. And again, go to helpandhopenow.org, where you're going to find loads and loads of free resources like this, our Help and Hope podcast. We have a daily devotional. You can go to Ask Dr. Betters on YouTube, where you can find answers to some of the hardest questions about suffering, where my husband Chuck answers questions. But most of all, we want you to know about Jesus. We want you to know that he loves you and that he's calling you. You're not listening to this conversation by mistake. It is because he wants you to know his heart for you, and he's inviting you to know him. If you don't know him, today's the day. And you can reach out to us at helpandhopenow.org. Just say, I need help. I want to know Jesus. And we will be in touch with you very quickly. Again, I'm Sharon Betters. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again.